Hello, hello. Hello, I'm J.K. Summerlin, and I have a whole world of plotting that I have done for my story. I thought this would be an interesting thing. I'm mostly going to be holding the camera like this just because I'm going to be talking about the different ideas that I have up there and seeing my Abby doesn't matter. I have the main themes. So I'm going to be walking through how do I go through making a brainstorm for a fiction story? What kinds of things do I need to worry about? And how would I have this organized? And so this is just a novelty thing of me doing this in VR to write things out. Um, and this would be much more efficiently managed, just like in a Word document or something. I initially wanted to have different categories so I'd have ideas there, and then I have a lot of weird technology stuff that might be on its own, where I could just do that in its own document. Those details don't matter from the big picture perspective of what we want to get. We want, if we're doing a snowflake outline or a spider outline, we want to get the big ideas that are important for getting the plot out there. So this is just, all of this here is just brainstorming for cool stuff or spicy stuff that I would want. So if I were doing this in a Word document, I would have all my brainstorming stuff in its own document, and then the rest of the things that I have a bit better organized, I would have kind of in their own sections elsewhere. But you could add a whole bunch here. So in the center, I have a couple of main themes that I want to focus on, and after getting a whole bunch of stuff out there for mood, we're talking about the need for human affection. So there's, in modernity, there's a lack of affection, and there's androids that have human level intelligence. They're nearing human level intelligence. That's an interesting discussion to have there. And at what point would robot marriage become accepted? Because then that's socially accepting that affection from androids is legitimate. Putting key events that should be there. I want to introduce the jazz band at a certain place. I want to have a big hook event that comes in with the gala shooting for a thing, and for the big loss that occurs, and we'll go over that. So I had key events that would be real punchy for stuff. But from going over different themes, another thing is having some background context that it helps to just write all these things out. And it doesn't really have to be that. I mean, this is completely disorganized because it's not a Word document or whatever. You might want to have something that is oh, backstory or whatever, but it really doesn't need to be like that. You just need a few themes, a few ideas that could all be jumbled together, and you can reference back to them when making the more structured stuff over here. So this does not have to be structured. This is just getting cool ideas out there that are related, and also maybe you'll have some ideas you don't really want to censor yourself initially with putting a bunch of junk up there. That's fine. Where you might come back and something that you thought was silly might turn out to be interesting. Like robot marriage, that idea was, when thinking about what to write at the very outset, I'm like, that's real odd. And it was kind of flippant putting that up there, but that is one of my central story things. And so the two things that really come up here is the A story and the B story. So I have keeping bots dumb and humans docile. That's not as direct as it should be after going back and writing the stuff up here. It's the main character is trying to make it a G1. So G100 is having general intelligence of 100 IQ. The protagonist, he wants to make a human level intelligent robot, but with the A story, a big evil corporation steals it basically, and they steal his stuff and use it to nefarious ends. They use it for bad purposes. So and the bad purpose that immediately comes to mind is militarization of robots, because you wouldn't trust a dumb robot with a gun. But if they have this guy makes intelligent robots, and they're able to steal that information, they're able to steal that technology, then the military is comfortable enough automating the military essentially. So that's an interesting thing that could come from that. And that's the main uh, external conflict that could be there. I was also talking. I invited a friend to help me build some of this with like opinions and all of that, discussing through some of the ideas. I don't necessarily have to have any external conflict in the sense that I don't really need to have like violence occurring, and violence is not conflict because it could all be psychological conflict. But if you want to make things marketable, especially if it's in a like if I have robots, I'm with like cool augmentations and all this. I want the robots to do cool things that are like dangerous and stuff. The B story being the internal development, talking about is it ethical, is it moral to have to be in love with a robot, and can a robot learn how to love, and also contrasting that from the main character's autism. If someone is autistic, uh, like you wouldn't. I mean, it would be I think in general, a lot of people would say it'd be unethical to say that someone who's autistic would be unable to experience love. But the whole thing of like of how Trucy develops, one of the characters, the second robot, how she develops to have past 100 IQ, like definitely for sure, she develops a greater sense of like being human than the main character who's autistic. She becomes like more nuanced with her social understanding and the like. So if he's autistic and has like less human characteristics than your average human expectations because of his autism, but he's able to love because he's a human being, then just from a strictly rational perspective, why would Trucy not be able to love? Also, don't mind that. That's just a reminder that I shouldn't touch that button because then everything would be deleted here and that would be an absolute mess. Another theme thing that I have, eat the bugs, live in the pod, making people docile from metabolism. That was another like brainstorm idea that I just put over here because that is kind of a theme, a feeling of like humiliation that goes along with the overall idea. I'm not going to have, oh, here's specifically where I talk about eating bugs and living in the pod. But having that kind of humiliation is something that's in the background that goes along well with the idea of not being able to have like a genuine human relationship where that's kind of its own humiliation. And I guess you could even make the argument that trying to have affection from a robot because human affection just doesn't exist because everyone's so damn selfish. There are not enough loving potential wives. No modern woman wants to be a loving wife. So there's a lack of that there, and that's something that I go into in the first chapter, way on the other side there. But these are so this is like the location brainstorm thing of a couple of places that I want. I definitely want the speakeasy to be there. I definitely want the gala hall to be there. Maybe having a repair garage for the robots, and a wine cellar in a church, especially if there's going to be a marriage scene, because like that's something where it's like having a church scene would be really, I don't know, as real punchy as like a place that you could have, and like you can refer back to your themes for like ideas for places that you might want to include. I don't necessarily like I already had an idea of like plot and characters to populate my locations for what I would need, but like marriage and church kind of go hand in hand, so you would want to brainstorm locations. So like each of these can be its own brainstorming board and then you select like the best from them. Um and these are like things that I kind of decided on pretty well. But remember, everything that we're doing with brainstorming for general themes, locations, for I have like a couple of this is the antagonist motivation. This is a special thing over here, but I also have characters over there. So I'm keeping um, locations separately. And if you're doing this in a Word document, it would just be like another Word document, or in Scrivener, it would just be another file within like a series of folders. Where you could do like a brainstorm for each one. I think something that would really help with guiding where your book goes is to have the antagonist's motivation. And so this is like a side conversation that I had with my friend when I invited them to this world, just to talk about how the book was going. Is that it's seen as evil to use genetic engineering to allow for people to have children with these robots, like without needing genetic input from a biological mother and a biological father, because you can synthesize the genetic material. So this is banned in the West, but it still exists out there, like in the Middle East and China, and maybe Japan. I don't know. I haven't decided whether or not, because I don't know if that would be realistic or not for Japan to be on board with the Jinzo Nigen thing. It's translated as android, but it's a human that is man-made. So man-made man doesn't make sense in English, which is why the Japanese term Jinzo Ningen like makes sense to a degree. It's like an artificial human, essentially. But regardless, fertility mods exist. So it is possible to have a human child from just one parent. Um, so the idea of like, how could you have a family? How could you have a genetic legacy? It's like, yeah, it is propped up by technology, but it's absolutely possible in this world. And the antagonist wants to make sure that this technology does not proliferate to the West. So this takes place in Chicago implicitly. It takes place in America, and so the perspective of it is, from a Western perspective, very largely. Antagonist's ultimate motivation is population reduction. So this is playing into like a conspiracy theory thing of like the elites have automated away the workforce. They don't need a basic workforce, and they would be a threat to them. This is something that I like talked through some of these ideas, some of these topics before, in just like a long form talk about some ideas that I have about technology in the future. A really interesting phrase that I'd have is a benign genocide. So, like killing off people en masse by allowing marriage to bots, making that legitimate, but also banning fertility mods, so that after a generation, people are very docile. I mean, people are very docile, but after a generation, they're not having kids. So that is mass population reduction without having to resort to any violent ends. So that's something. This is like my beginning with the end in mind. Is I don't have to write the last chapter or whatever, like the last word, but I have to know the antagonist's ultimate motivation, and I have to keep this secret from people. I have to make sure that they're not looking at population reduction like in the front of their mind. Like that's something that I bring up in chapter 1, that a lot of the people are like the guys that go to the speakeasy, the clients that go there, like nobody has families. Even Gris, the older guy that runs the bar, he doesn't have a family even though he wants one, just because there's no like reasonable way to find a partner, and especially at his age, he doesn't have hope for that. Regardless, let's go over to uh, this is my character list, and you don't need a whole lot for characters. You could go into like a whole lot of detail with it, and I have gone into a whole lot more detail. But the 3 things that I like for just like getting a concept of a character out there is, of course, you need their name, but kind of who are they? Like, what do they do? What are they skilled at? So I'll start off with the protagonist. You want to know who your protagonist, who your antagonists are, and so I have like the people in blue, the names in blue are the forces for good, basically. And you don't have to write out every single character and do this for every single character. Especially, don't worry so much about side characters. Like I took all of today. I took ridiculous. I've been doing this for like 8 hours now. Yeah, I've been doing outlining stuff for 8 hours. That's a significant amount of time. Not just writing this. This has probably been 2 hours of work doing this, with along with the verbal discussions that I had with my friends for getting some feedback, and just like running some ideas through with them. And that has helped me a lot for narrowing stuff down. But let's talk about the 3 things. What do they do? Zin is a programmer. He is autistic. So what do they do? Like what are their skills? What's something that defines them as like, an occupation or whatever? And you don't have to think about that too much. And then something that's like a quirky characteristic. So something that will allow you to differentiate like their voice or their behavior. And it really helps to have something that's a physical characteristic, like something they carry with them, or something about their attire. Like a really good one that I don't have on here, that I'm not using in this book, is if someone has a long scarf. Just like something simple like that. It's a little bit off from like, what not everyone wears a really long scarf, and so like sometimes you want to break up the dialogue with a bit of prose going on there. So like if someone has a long scarf, then let's say they're walking onto a subway train, that as instead of just, oh, they walked onto the subway train, you could mention that this character walks onto the subway train and he hugs his scarf closely so that it doesn't get caught in the door. Or I mean, if you're doing something that's like comedic or showing that they're like really not paying attention, you could have it get caught in the door, I guess. Or you could have a friend that they're like pulling a joke on them, so they pull the scarf to like drag them like a leash. So like you can see, there's a lot of stuff that you can do with like just having a scarf. Or I have like smaller things that are like characterizations here, like for Zin, he's autistic, so that's going to affect the way that he speaks, but that's not like a physical thing. That'll help with like sentence tags and things that he does in between conversations. So he's going to have what's called a worry stone, which I had one of these things where like it's something that you hold in your hand, where it's just a stone that you rub with your thumb and it like calms you down a bit. It's just something to hold and to like kinesthetically be able to like move around. So he's going to be like playing with us. Like he's going to, and I would do this a lot when I had a worry stone, just not like a verbal tick. It's like a body language tick of like I'd put it down and like pick it back up. So like it kind of like make this snapping noise as I place it on a table. So that would be something that would like punctuate the story. And I want it to be an opal. I didn't write this down, but I want it to be an opal so that it has like a certain color, color scheme, an iridescent color scheme to it, and it gets shinier the longer, and it's really really shiny because he uses it a lot, and like the oils from your skin would make it shiny from that. And so you have uh like who are they, what do they do, and then what's something quirky about them, and then what their desire is. That's all you need. Those three things are all you need for like basic characterization. You go into greater characterization if you like want to really write out greater details, but this is something where if you can't figure out what do they want, look back to your themes. Figure out, okay, so what are some themes that are here? Like if I have a theme of loneliness, then I would make like a central thing, like this guy is really inept at talking to people, which I mean he's autistic, but his main goal is he wants to like be a hero contributing to the advancement of humanity by making the first true AI, the first truly intelligent AI. So he wants to break G100. I'm just going to do a brief example of Gris, and then I'll go to the antagonist. I'm going to skip over like for I can just say quickly for Mal, he's going to be much more charismatic. He's going to be a foil for Zin. So Zin's not very charismatic. He's not very like humorous or whatever. He's very by the book and very rational. Mal's much more laid back to contrast that. So it's good to you can just have like a couple of notes if you don't even want to go out for like longer details for there. So you can see I have Gris, where he's the mentor figure, where he's the gray fox archetype. A guy that's old but handsome in his age, and he's very smooth and very calm in the way that he talks. And he knows Chinese. That's like a thing for him. And he has he likes to have like physical booklets that have the Chinese characters in them, that have like proverbs and such, partly to like keep up on memorizing the different Hanzi, but also to because it's like insightful to look back on those things. And his whole goal, his whole motivation thing, which is kind of like a secret motivation, like the on the surface motivation, he just wants his bar to be successful. So that's like a real simple thing. But his like true motivation, and you can do that. You can have like a surface motivation and then like something that's hidden from others. But his true motivation is that he wants to have a son, but he has no hope of ever having a family. And he knows that like his time is past, but still like a lot of stuff that he's worried about is like escapism. Um, Escapism should be a main theme. Like if I were writing in a Word document, I'd put escapism up there. Trucy the AI, I can just go over her quickly. Femme fatale, but also very curious. You don't really have that with like classical noirs. You don't have like someone who's like innocent and curious, but also the girl to die for. But because she is her main characteristic is she is moral and honest to a fault, and her whole goal very simple. Um, so in addition to like just being rational, like the whole thing is she's rational to the end of being moral in like the classical Greek sense of like, does this logically make sense for leading to the good? So that's her like rhetorical style. I'm not too sure about a physical thing to distinguish her. I do want her. I want like her physical appearance to be like a sporty tomboy, just because that contrasts from like, oh, this high intellectual whatever. She's not like going to be wearing a ballroom gown all the time or whatever. Maybe for like a formal occasion, like if she does the singing bit that Syrah does. I should have put Syrah up here, because Syrah is like the 1.0 of the attempt to get into intelligence. But you can expand on this. This is just a sample of it, and I want to get into the plot. The plot over there that I have on those 4 panels, that's going to be a big thing that we go into. But I really don't really have that much for antagonists. I kind of have like general deep state glowy goons that execute the will of Ogden essentially, and like the will of the deep state. But so that's like there can be like vague antagonists, like the orcs could be like a vague antagonist, and you might have like a couple of, if you're fighting against orcs, you might have like a couple of things for, oh, the orcs in the mines of Moria, or the orcs at the Black Gate. You could have like different things going on there, or like the orc siege at Helm's Deep, but like generally orcs. So there's like the nameless bad guy goons, henchmen. That's something that could be there, and like these henchmen serve this is the Dark Lord Sauron. In this situation is Ogden, who is our CEO. I think it's Emmanuel Ogden is the name that I'm going with. So he's like a flippant kind of CEO who seems to be against the grain, but that's just a show. His whole goal is he wants population reduction. That's his thing. He wants to go with that agenda, but he wants power as well. So another thing, I don't know how to fit this in, but as just like as a theme that I went over that like hits really well, is he wants to control all AI. So imagine if there's Apple and PC, where like Apple laptops are like a pre-built and come out of the box but don't have much customization for it. Imagine if there was like that, but for androids, for robots. I mean, that's hard because there's the kind of cell phone that's an android, but where there's like an out of the box, you can't really modify it kind of thing. But that has like nearly a monopoly, where it's really rare and really hard for people who are not like experts in technology to build their own rig. So it's kind of like the issue of building a custom PC. Not everyone can do that, even though there's not a ridiculous gate of entry to it. It takes a lot of effort and homework to be able to build your own PC. But he wants to control all the like freshly made from the market kind of AIs. And an undertone is they want to make those custom rigs illegal because they're a threat, and a threat to their market as well. But like the big hidden motivation, so that's external motivation, is he's just greedy and wants to have a monopoly over androids, and that's why he would push for making privately owned androids like illegal, or needing some kind of like weird legislation on that. His true goal is to do this population reduction thing that's going to remain hidden. Okay, so I have some characters. If you get stuck on making characters or figuring out what do they want, or what are some quirks, because also you can display some of the themes through the quirks that they have. Well, let's go to a theme. So, if I wanted to have a sense of, okay, belonging and affection are two really important themes. So, since Mal, I have Mal up there as like a side character, since he's a foil to Zin. Zin is kind of a lonely guy, and being autistic, he's not going to have a lot of people that he can relate to really well, but he still has the very human desire to have human connection and affection. He's just not really good at articulating himself. But I'd want at least one person that has like a healthy upbringing. And so like I would put that on Mal, where he's had an upbringing of being in, oh, and I actually have a backstory that I have in a side document that I just remembered, of someone having like a childhood friend that, if not for like modernity being really stupid with the things that people end up getting indoctrinated into, with like exposure to larger social media. Like if they were just in their small town, then he would have married his high school sweetheart. If they like just stayed in the small town mindset, but basically modernity poisoned the mind of his potential wife. and that's why he kind of became dedicated to becoming a lifelong bachelor, is because of that betrayal that he had no control over. I have betrayal written up there because it would be interesting to take a side character that doesn't have much characterization, and like this guy's supposed to be a hero, but I could have him, I make him a lot more interesting by saying, okay, so he's a friend, so he's interesting there, but a friend that becomes an enemy, that adds a lot of intrigue. I might have betrayal. Um, I don't really have a place for that, but that's like a brainstorm thing that I did off the cuff there.